Hello everyone, we're back, and I'm back with a bottle of Bushmills. Now I will get this out of the way. For this collection, this particular bottle is a Whisky Shop exclusive. I do work for the Whisky Shop, for those of you that didn't know. That to one side, I kid you not, as far as Irish whiskey goes, this is the greatest one I've ever tried. Big statement, opening on pretty bold claims, but it's the truth. Now, this is a single cask whiskey. We'll get into the finite details in a bit. So it's a very unique fingerprint of how utterly incredible any whiskey can be, as are all single casks. I love the Redbreast range. Redbreast 15 and 21 are two of the greatest whiskies I've ever tried. They're much more readily available. They're not as expensive. They're not as old, but I'm not gonna hold that against them. So by me saying this is possibly the greatest Irish whiskey I've ever tried, it doesn't make Redbreast 15 and 21 or the 12 or Green Spot or Powers or Clonakilty, which I was quite impressed with, or numerous other things that come from Ireland inferior. They're still amazing products, but this has legitimately blown me away. So the facts, the figures, let me lift this glass up. This is part of the Causeway collection. As you can see from this box, it's modelled after the Causeway stones on the Giant's Causeway. I don't know how many were released in the range. Last year, we, as a company, got an exclusive 19-year-old red wine cask. I've never had the phone ring so much for a bottle that I'd never heard of before. There was only about 200 of them produced. I know 168, something like that, very low number. They were £200 a bottle. They started going for like £800 on auction. This is part 2 of the Causeway collection. Again, I've no idea how many are in the collection. This was the one that was given to us as a company exclusive. It is distilled Halloween 1991, so the 31st of October 1991. For those first 13 years, for the first 13 years of its life, it was matured. I think it went from bourbon, or it was matured in a combination of bourbon and oloroso casks. I think it was separate stock, right? It was then recasked on the 17th of February 2005. All of the stock was then put into a Madeira barrel. It's 738 bottles. It was in that Madeira barrel for 16 years. So it doesn't say finished on the, oh no, it does say finished in Madeira casks, and then the recast dates underneath it. 16 years isn't really a finish, that's just additional maturation. So yeah, bourbon, oloroso, and Madeira. 50.2% alcohol, 738 bottles. This is bottle 177. Single cask, exclusive for the Whisky Shop. Now, the big thing is the price on this. It's 29 years old. It is a fiver under £700 a bottle. Now, for those of you that would never spend £700 on a bottle of whiskey, I fully understand your perspective, because that is a lot of money to spend on a liquid. For those of you that are like me, and indeed a lot of you are, who watch this channel, most 30-year-old whiskies, single malts, this is a single malt whiskey, it's an Irish single malt, so it's triple distilled. Most 30-year-old-ish single malt whiskies, let's think about, I think the Glenfiddich 30 is now like £400 or £500 a bottle. The new Balvenie 30 is £1,400 a bottle. Macallan 30 is £5,000. Who else has a 30-year-old? All the big ones. Glenlivet 30, no, there's not really a Glenlivet 30, there's a 25. Bunnahabhain 30-year-old is like 500. Dalmore 30, I think, is like a couple of thousand, £2,000–3,000. So, yes, it's a lot of money. But also, yes, in the grand scheme of 29-ish, 30-year-old whiskey, it's pretty affordable. It's a single cask, so it's rare. I'm trying to back up all of the points that I'm making in this, because in all honesty, when it comes to the taste of this thing, when we opened this, I was just like, it's a Bushmills. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's gonna be a long story before I actually taste this stuff. Most of us know this brand. They do have some premium products. They've got a 16-year-old, they've got a 21-year-old, they've just redone the bottles on them. They look a little bit more modern. I do prefer this bottle, because for me it's nostalgic. But it's not a whiskey which has ever really sat in like a premium price bracket. When it comes to Irish whiskey, Middleton have owned that for years, and Teeling too. Teeling have had some like quite expensive old whiskey. And then this came out, and I was like, from a salesman point of view, and indeed a retail point of view, somebody who runs this shop, I was like, man, you know, we had huge demand last year, but the bottle was only 200 quid and there wasn't a lot of it. This is significantly more expensive and there's more bottles. Not many more bottles, but still more bottles. From the collector point of view, is it worth it? Still hasn't been one of these on an auction. From the drinker point of view, we have no idea because we're not going to get to open it. And then I opened one. In all honesty, just out of interest, like, what does this thing taste like? There are 738 bottles of it. I'm going to open one of them. It was a tricky email to work, but I opened it nonetheless. And it was a very busy day in December. All of the staff in this shop, we'd all had a very intense day. We locked the door, we opened it, and we poured quite sensible measures, as you can see from that bottle. And every single one of us, we had some new members of staff in, and then we have members of staff who've worked with me for as long as I've been here, who are as experienced as I am with all things whiskey. And each one of us just went, wow. And none of us could believe it. And whatever Bushmills are doing, release more stuff like this. Do it on a more affordable scale, because they did a 21-year-old port cask UK exclusive, which is also upstairs. That's just under £300. But again, I'm quite intrigued by that. But never has a bottle of whiskey that's this expensive, minus one other bottle, which I have actually bought to open this year, which is a Highland Park 30, because I turned 30 this year, and that bottle's becoming more expensive. Never before have I tried a whiskey of that price point, where internally I'm going, I want that. And that says more than enough for me. But that's the stuff, that's all the feel. The inside of the box is particularly pretty too. Let me show you that. Make sure I don't clip this microphone. Beautiful bit of presentation. You get some nice information on the side about the cask influence. There's some tasting notes here too. A little bit more info about the cask selection down here. But yes, smell, taste, and voila. Now at 50.2, the alcohol is a little bit present. It does spike your nose a bit. And most of you will know from that cognac video that I did a couple of weeks ago on Hennessy, and I'm trying to get into cognac more. This is what I wanted cognac to smell like. It is full of coffee and walnuts and this beautiful aroma of like cigar boxes and mint, and a very specific northwest English tasting, a smelling note of like Kendal mint cake in particular, which is just sugar in a bar for when you like hiking up mountains. The coffee thing is insane. Like I drink coffee, I don't want to get massively into it because it's just another expensive hobby, but it's like the freshest roasted, the most fresh roasted coffee stuff I've ever come across in my life. The walnut thing is incredible. And the way that works with the coffee note just kind of puts you into this era of like chocolate indulgence, caramelized nut, toffee, brittle kind of things. I want to talk about the cigar box note because that's my most favorite thing in this. So my dad smoked roll-up cigarettes, and occasionally he would smoke, I think he used to smoke Benson and Hedges. But mostly he'd smoke roll-up cigarettes. He'd roll them himself, he'd smoke them outside, or he'd go for a smoke when he walked the dog. As a child, for some reason, I was obsessed with James Bond as a kid, as most children are. And for some reason, my dad used to have cigar boxes in the house. Now, he never smoked cigars, so I've no idea where he got cigar boxes from. Probably his friend or something who did. And he used to give me these cigar boxes. And because I was obsessed with James Bond as a kid, I used to open them and put like my most favorite things in these boxes. It was like a treasure trove for me almost. There'd be like, I can't even, like, as a kid, like Pokemon cards and stuff like that. This would be like my little secret safe thing where all my favorite things would be kept. And when I smelt this whiskey for the first time, and I've had cigar box notes in the past, but when I first smelt this, it threw me straight back to that first cigar box I got given as a kid. And I opened it, and I didn't know and shouldn't really know what tobacco smelled like as a child. but it was just that smell. Resiny wood, the old fading smell of tobacco leaf. And it puts me right there. Unlike the Macallan we reviewed last week, it's a little bit chocolatey, not overly chocolatey. And then that mint thing. I don't know if it's the wood, like, I've never tried anything which has been matured in Madeira casks for 16 years. The regular 21-year-old Bushmills has some Madeira influence. It's an okay whiskey, I think the 16 is better. But that length of maturation in this Madeira, I don't know if that's where the tobacco things come from. I don't know if that's where the mint thing has come from. But it's this raw, fresh, chopped, crushed mint thing. Like a mint julep is one of my favourite cocktails, just because of that raw, intense smell of it. And again, this is just bucket loads. And then there's like a peanut thing in the back, it's slightly drying. I get no sherry on it at all. The DNA of the whiskey, the sherry could be backing up some of these notes I'm talking about, but there's no fruitcake, there's no raisin, there's no sort of marinated fruit thing. There's none of that at all. There's a beautiful hit of vanilla, like vanilla cream almost. And again, just that slight prickle of alcohol in the back. But as you can tell, quite a fan. But let's taste it. So it's 29 years old. I'll try and do the 29 seconds thing. Nearly did 29 seconds, I think it was like 25. So the arrival, right? Sweet wood, like soft sweet oak, bit of toffee, bit of mint. As you swirl that, the mint thing just starts to do this, just explodes. As a bourbon fan, there is no bourbon I've ever tried which is as minty as this. And it's not offensively minty, it's not like eating toothpaste. It's just cleansing. It just sits in the back with the wood. The coffee thing is gone. It does not taste of coffee, but it smells of coffee. The taste is this rolling flavour of dark caramel and vanilla. Like creme patisserie sort of thing. 29 years in numerous different types of oak does lead it to be drying and quite intense, especially towards the finish. But as I speak to you now, my mouth is watering. You might hear it on the mic, hopefully not, because it's probably not a nice sound. Taste two. Again, not quite 29 seconds, but I can live with myself. Yeah, the creme caramel thing. It isn't as exotic as a Redbreast 21, or even a 15. There's none of that passion fruit, mango, pineapple thing. It's not as sherried as Old Glendronach and Old Macallan. That doesn't bother me though, because I'm kind of falling away from sherried whiskey, unless it's peated. I really don't have that much of an interest anymore. I'm in the phase where I'm just not enjoying sherry at the minute. But my God, if this was Madeira and bourbon, just a old whiskey, sign me up for the rest of my life. Creme caramel, the peanut things there. There's a slight peanut buttery thing, like the dryness of it reminds me of the dryness of peanut butter. Crunchy, for those of you that are interested. And then the finish. For those of you that have ever had creme brulee, there's a restaurant in Manchester called El Gato Negro, and it's probably my partner and I's favourite restaurant. They serve like an orange infused creme brulee, and it just tastes of that. You get this slight bit of orange rind, which is both bitter and sweet, and then there's the creaminess of it all. Triple distilled, not a pot still, single malt. So it doesn't have any unmalted barley in it. So typically it shouldn't be as creamier, but the amount of cask influence on this thing has just led it to be delicious. Excuse me. And then as you get through that richness of orange and cream and vanilla, the mint comes back. And then it rests on this really subtle tobacco note again. So it's not the most complex thing on the planet, but the flavours keep coming back and forth. It's like a tennis match between these things. They keep just doing this. But through the middle of all of it is that mint. And then the drying nature of the cask influence. I'll be real, like, several of us in store are saying, we'll split a bottle between us, which I think is a wonderful idea. But at the same time, the inner part of me kind of goes, I want one just for me. So this will be the ongoing internal battle that I play with myself for most of 2022, I imagine. Forgot to mention, cash strength and non-chill filtered. 50.2% ABV. Doesn't say natural colour, but I imagine if it does the two, it probably does the other one as well, because 29 years probably gives you a colour as akin to that. Scoring. Is it expensive? Yes, it is. In the grand scheme of whiskies of a similar price range, it's cheaper on average, and it's significantly rarer at the same time. Do I think it's worth it? If I was single and wasn't saving up for a house, absolutely it's worth it. If you own a house and you don't have a joint account with your partner, buy one. Hang on, let's think back here. This video is very long, I do apologise. I have never, the most expensive whiskey that's ever gotten a 10 is the Cavalan, or was the Cavalan Virgin Oak, which I got a bit of stick for because people thought the Legendary 19 should have got it, but it was just the best whiskey I tried that year. This also gets one. They have both been whiskey shop exclusives, but I did pick that Cavalan. So for any of you that are thinking, oh, he works for the company, he's just doing it because he works for them. No, these are just, this in particular. For me to say this is better than Redbreast 21 takes a lot, because I own that whiskey and I adore that whiskey. For me to say this is better than most Macallans I've ever tried, or most Glendronachs that I've ever tried, it is. For those of you that maybe can't deal with that because you're huge fans of that brand, you might just have to accept the fact that I think this tastes better, because it just does. And I never thought I would say that again about a bottle of Bushmills, because who would have thought? But I think that's part of the appeal. But it gets a 10. Yeah, that's it from me. I'll see you all next week. Cheers.